Bravery, leadership, and resilience. These three words perfectly capture the incredible stories of some amazing women we're going to talk about today. Welcome to the Count Me In podcast, and my name is Ustumbeko Wamblawe, but you can call me Stu Relatable, your internet auntie. The Count Me In podcast is a 3-part series where we celebrate the impact of women in our political, social, and cultural sector. Today, we'll hear stories of bravery that we as young people should strive to embody. We'll look at women change makers in leadership roles and explore the contributions of some of Zambia's most iconic leaders in our society. As usual on the Count Me In podcast, I'm never alone. We have another amazing panel. One thing about the Count Me In podcast is that we try to make those uncomfortable conversations comfortable. So today we have another diverse and dynamic panel. And before we get into it, I'd like each of our panelists to just introduce themselves so that you in your living room can understand who they are and why they are here today. I think I'm going to start right there today.
So thank you so much. And I'm looking forward to this conversation. My name is Ruth K. Kangwa Ndlovu, and I like to call myself a beautiful troublemaker. My trouble is good. I am a human rights lawyer as well as a youth and gender expert, and I lead currently, but also founded a social movement called Girls Gone Political. I think basically it's a movement that amplifies the voices of girls and young women to participate in the political sphere, but as well as increase the participation of meaningful and authentic young women, not only in politics, but as well as the public service. Yeah, I think that's me in a nutshell for now. I've got many hats to me, but this is it.
It's a big nutshell. At least I like when you said the words meaningful, because sometimes there's this thing where we're just so loud, but then there is absolutely no meat or context that comes from conversation. So thank you for being here.
Thank you so much.
The next person, I'm not going to sing today.
My name is Dingindaba Jonah Buyoya. I am a storyteller.
Yeah.
And because of that, I also happen to be a journalist. And and a person. I'm a person. I'm a very goofy a person who loves to take care of our country. And I do this in several ways. But I think that the biggest is being a gatekeeper of information. And my favorite thing on this earth is to fight with politicians and their friends.
But I'd like to confess something to you. I am so lazy when it comes to like breaking news occasionally. So when I know that there's something big happening in the country, especially like parliament opening, I am so lazy that I just go on Twitter. Because I know that Jonah is summarizing everything for us. So I'll be like, I'll check in after 2 minutes and you're always on point. So thank you for saving me and making you look like I'm so informed when half the time I'm not. I am the life of every party.
Well, after the threads, then you are informed.
Exactly.
Yes.
That's why I'm like, the more you know, you better know Jonah.
So I'll keep tweeting.
Keep tweeting. That's how you people's generation. Anyway, we'll get into that soon. But before we go there, we need to go this side. And I'm so excited. So I'm going to, yes.
Hi. Thank you for having me, first of all. My name is Linda Kasonde. I am a lawyer. I like to say that I'm a Zambian with a heart for the African continent. Yes. I'm also someone who is interested in leadership more broadly, whether it's political or any other kind of leadership. And I also strive to promote women in leadership specifically.
Yeah. I'm so happy you're here. You have no idea, because I personally look up to you, and I have been following you for the longest time.
Oh.
Not in a stalkery way, but then, my family would be like, because when I was young, I was supposed to be a lawyer, but then that didn't happen, but we'll talk about that later. But before we get into the conversations, I want us just to have a run through of how the discussion is going to be. So what we're going to do is we're going to check out this amazing documentary that was made on some iconic leaders. And from there, we're just going to have a conversation and just break everything into deeper depth. And from there, we're just going to check out some vox pops because we want to get the word off the street and what's happening. And from there, we'll just come back and just wrap everything in one beautiful bow. So are we ready to do this and have this conversation?
Let's do it.
I am ready. So, ladies and gentlemen, wherever you're watching us from, please let us check out this documentary, and we'll be right back after the interesting conversation so we can pick it up. In a world shaped by the digital revolution, young people today have unprecedented access to knowledge, data, and platforms. For Zambia's Gen Z, it's a time of immense possibility, a chance to lead, influence, and reshape the future like never before. But despite this, the question lingers: can Gen Z make good leaders? The idea of young leadership is not new. At the time of Zambia's independence, young women stepped forward to shape their communities, carving out a space in leadership even when the odds were against them. Women like Juliet Kamonika, a fierce activist who challenged colonial rule, and Princess Nakatindi Wina, a voice for women's rights in the early political landscape, proved that youth could lead. They laid the foundation for generations to come. Meet Linda Kasonde, a trailblazing Zambian lawyer, activist, and writer who's changing the game for human rights. She joined the Zambian bar in 2001 and became the first woman named partner at the top-tier law firm Mulenga Mundashi & Company in 2004. In 2016, she made history again as the first female president of the Law Association of Zambia, advocating for democracy and civil liberties. Linda also founded the Chapter 1 Foundation and runs her own practice, LCK Chambers. She's an inspiring force for justice and equality.
There are 3 pieces of advice I'd give young people who want to become activists. The first is have courage. As Dr. Maya Angelou once said, courage is the highest of all virtues, because without it, you can't exercise any other virtue consistently. And so you must have courage to be able to pursue the causes that you believe in. The second thing I would say is not everyone is going to like you. And they don't have to like you, but you should have conviction in what it is you're doing in your work. And just as an example, you only have to think of Jesus Christ, who came for a very noble cause to save humanity, and yet he ended up crucified on a cross. So even if your cause is righteous, sometimes it comes with pain, sometimes it comes with the ultimate sacrifice. And so, which leads me to my last point on sacrifice. Being an activist is not a bed of roses. Often you have to sacrifice time with your family, your security, and your free time in order to advance causes. But that's why conviction is so important, because without it, you will fall. You will not be able to get back up. So I would say all those 3 things are very important to being a genuine activist.
Before Linda Kasonde became a prominent legal figure in the 2000s, Zambia's fight for gender justice was led by pioneers like Gwendolyn Kony, Betty Chilunga, Mama Kankasa, and Malina Chilila, to name a few. Gwendolyn Kony was a freedom fighter, politician, ambassador, and poet who spent her life fighting for women's rights and poverty reduction. In 1962, before Zambia gained independence, she was appointed to the country's Legislative Council. In 2001, she made history by running for president with the Social Democratic Party, which she founded. Her focus was on women, children, and fighting poverty, believing that true progress would only happen if women were part of decision-making. Even though we've made some strides, women's participation in the workforce is still pretty low. However, with a lot of courage, passion, and determination, anyone can make a difference. Just look at Malila Chilila. She became the youngest member of parliament in 1964 when Dr. Kenneth Kaunda nominated her. Speaking of young trailblazers, Colonel Mwizukanji Namwawanyambe also made history as the youngest female colonel in the Zambia army. These women remind us that age should never stop us from pursuing our dreams. Whether you're young or young at heart, your voice matters.
The way to get more women into leadership roles is to kind of showcase the women who are already in leadership, allow them to tell their stories, allow them to inspire other women and men. I think that we can do a lot of things for ourselves, but inspiration is not something that you can do for yourself. You need to be inspired by other people. And I say this because there are already women who are doing amazing things in their respective fields, but for whatever reasons, their stories are not mainstream. But when you unearth these amazing women who are defying the odds already under very challenging circumstances, that can be a good motivation for other women. And then also even just for policymakers and leaders to see that women are actually capable. The female experience is not limiting at all. So I think that is a very kind of powerful tool to be able to inspire other women and to inspire decision makers to ensure that, we're included in the rooms where decisions are being made.
However, this new generation faces challenges of its own. Now, it's not just women who must break down barriers in leadership, it's a whole generation.
Overcoming challenges is sometimes hard, it's overwhelming. Growing up as a teenager, there's a lot of insecurities that you're faced with, a lot of stress, but then it's all about the mind. You're supposed to have a strong mind, you're supposed to be strong. I find my voice by being myself, by seeking help from others and just being myself, being confident and courageous and giving myself a sense of mind that what I'm doing is going to benefit others, it's going to benefit myself.
However, this new generation faces challenges of its own. Now, it's not just women who must break down barriers in leadership, it's a whole generation. Young people today must confront stereotypes and biases that question their ability to lead effectively. But with the world at their fingertips, Gen Z is better equipped than ever. They have the tools, the platforms, and the knowledge to build on the work of those who came before them. The future of Zambia's leadership is bright, with young women and men rising to the occasion, shaping a new narrative and redefining what it means to lead. With a legacy of trailblazers behind them, Gen Z has every reason to believe that they are more than capable of leading the way. The question isn't, can they lead? The question is, how far will they go? Once again, thank you guys so much for being here and helping us tackle this very important issue. One of the things we are going to talk about actually today is whether Gen Z can actually lead. I'm saying that because I know, Jonah, you're very passionate about the word Gen Z and how you find yourself in there. But the first thing I want to do is tell you a story of what happened to me. Once I was hiring for a position in the organization I was working for, and we wanted somebody who was young, vibrant, and energetic, because those are the words that they use. I did not know at that point that I did not fit that description anymore. So I got a lot of CVs, and I was going through them, and I found somebody that was very interesting. So I called him in for an interview, and I tell you the truth, it's the first time that I was ever faced with interviewing a Gen Z. And I can tell you that it was one of the most hilarious yet confusing interviews of my life. Because this person came with first of all, one thing about Gen Z is that you guys are so confident. This person came in with I already got this, I already got this. I don't need to go through the interview because the interview is just a formality. So I'd ask him things like, tell me about your past experience. And he says, oh, you can just Google my name. It'll pop up. And I'm like, some of us millennials, we have this thing where we are interviewing people. You've got box 1, 2, 3, 4, and you tick where that 1 is the lowest and 4 is the highest. I'm like, how do I do that if I have to Google your name? So for me, I'm like, that experience was something that was a little bit, I didn't understand it. So I think as we begin the conversation, I think I'm going to throw it to Linda Kasonde. Your generation, I feel like, it was a time when you were not given things on a silver platter, the way we currently are in the modern generation. So how was it like as a woman, first of all, trying to break into spaces where there were not as many women? How did you go about that?
Well, firstly, I've never subscribed to the idea that I was ever inferior to any other gender. And luckily, I was also raised that way. So, but it's something that came really through experience. A lot of women experience the imposter syndrome, and they have to grow their confidence with time. So definitely experience was a great teacher, and just believing that you belong where you want to go will really stand you in good stead.
Yeah. I like that you've mentioned the imposter syndrome, because personally, I don't know if you've experienced it, but personally, it's something that I battle with sometimes. I feel like I get into a room and I do not belong in that space. I look at the people around me and I just feel like I'm not enough. What I bring to the table is not enough, and it ends up just impacting the way I view things and the way I end up talking or presenting myself. So I don't know if you've ever gone through that as a woman, especially since you're in the international sphere and you're dealing with so much. Do you think you've ever experienced imposter syndrome?
Unfortunately, I'm quite honest. I don't think I have. I'm a person that likes to, first of all, read the room, but self-check. I'm very intentional about being aware of self, surrounding. So it's kind of helped me balance myself in terms of remembering who I am, where I'm coming from. However, if we talk about it broadly and generally, it is a syndrome that affects a lot of people because we tend to get out of character or play, just like you're saying. You feel, especially in the leadership kind of space for a young person, many other young people, I don't belong at this table because, okay, I'm young, and you become very apologetic. Sorry, sir, before I say this, if it sounds, no. But all of this is because I think I had parents or foundation where my grandparents allowed me to be self. Now I'm able to also kind of challenge them, and they don't like that. But it's something I'd want to pass on to Gen Z. I'm not a Gen Z. I'm proudly a millennial.
Yeah.
I think for young people who want to step into the leadership space, even for young women, they need to be able to embody the spirit of resilience, boldness, leadership, integrity, but as well as a collaborative spirit so that they do not find themselves in that imposter syndrome. I say this because many people now tend to have, it becomes a trend. If Ruth or Florence Jedidah is posing like this, this is a set norm. But what we begin to do is water down the image or the role that we should play in. For example, with activists now, right?
Yeah.
Everyone sees and thinks, okay, to be an activist, I should be radical.
Loud,
I should be loud, But like you said earlier on, sometimes there's no substance in being
noise,
loud,
exactly.
right? And people in the room stop listening to you or hearing what you're saying. But this is all because we have set a tone, we've set an image to what the ideal activist should look like. And this is what one of my good friends, a male, was stating, that if we're not too careful, for not too long, we're going to set a tone, an accent, a face, a dress code to what different roles should be, what a politician should be, what a teacher should speak like, what an advocate should be like. So I think, we need to work around that with self first.
Started by saying she's not a Gen Z, but that's really what Gen Z sound like.
Even I'm like, okay, maybe because you're just at the cusp of millennial, but some of us were full blown in. There's no denying it. Born and bred 80s girl, So for me, it's when were you born? When you just say 80, and they know that that's who you are.
Yeah.
So now I like that you talked about confidence, and you also talked about stepping into rooms. So I just want to, Jonah, for you, you're a Gen Z, but I'm sorry, but for you, you're Gen Z. And one thing that I've noticed about you is that for somebody who is a Gen Z, you're actually quite accomplished, especially in your work field. And as somebody who also has a journalism background, by the way, I did not have the opportunities that you younger people currently have. I did when I tell you that when I was in school and they said you're going to do journalism, everybody told me don't be a journalist because all you're going to do is hold the microphone and interview ministers, or all you're going to do is sit and read the news. But now that the world is a global village, you guys are accomplishing things. I know you did the you got the Komla Duma Award recently, and you're the first Zambian to get that, and you found yourself in a new environment. How do you think that experience impacted you, one, and how you think you view leadership as a young person in this country?
First, Southern African.
Southern African.
Yes.
Yes, you're making it right. You know what? Claim your space.
Yeah. I wanna start first of all by, because it's something you said to Linda, and you were saying that the newer generation has things on a silver platter. You kind of insinuated it to me as well, but I don't agree. I think that maybe the challenges may be different from what they were previously, but I think that the world never runs out of challenges to throw at people. And when you look at the current generation, because that's what I experience, I feel like they have a lot to deal with. And apart from a time when you had to deal with your community, what your community is going to say, what your family is going to say, you've got a bigger community that's going to say something.
Yeah.
It's either you're going to place yourself, and I'm talking about the digital platforms, it's either you're going to place yourself there, and when you place yourself there, you're basically showcasing yourself to the rest of the world, and they're subject to say something about you.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But you also have the option to not be a part of that society, but they will say something about you even when you're not part of that society. So it's like a very complex world as well. And maybe just that people are a lot more, and because people are a lot more aware of their emotions, they can easily recognize them and feel those emotions and all those things. So life is also very difficult. There's nothing on the silver platter. But
yeah, I think Jonah is saying something. Sorry, Jonah. I'm thinking of, I think I once saw a meme where they said, so the people that think they don't post on WhatsApp are more mature.
Exactly.
Or hide their blue ticks, they've got this kind of standard. But you find that sometimes they're the most childish people. And
exactly.
But
even what you've said is a self check on my part, because every time my mother would say something I'd be doing something and my mother's like, when I was your age, we did not have cars. We had to walk 5 kilometers to go to school. And I'd roll my eyes. Or when I was your age, we did not have this. But now, as you're speaking, I now begin to feel it in my head, because now I also say things like, when I was your age, we did not have cell phones where we could Google. Well, we had, but it was really bad internet.
Or ChatGPT.
Yeah, we did not have ChatGPT, or we did not have these nice 5G cell phones that could help us get information easier. So what you're saying, you're right. Each generation has its own challenges, and maybe it's not right for us to say, you guys have it on a silver platter, because that's exactly what my mother would say, because I was being driven to school and now she was working, and now you have all this. So it does not mean that your challenges are any less better than us. But then it goes back to the question I was asking you earlier. How do you think your experience has shaped how you view leadership as a person?
I think that from very personal experience, I think that I have been very privileged. I love to use the word privilege because it's a realization. I first of all started working before I was qualified to work at a very young age. I mean, I started working right out of high school at the age of 17, and I've been working since, so I had to juggle school and work. But the thing is, all of this, I think that contributes to leadership, right? And the demands that are there, and I'm going to start tying in the Gen Z as well, my peers generally, the demand that is there for us to expect people that have just gotten out of university, people that have just gotten their first job or just 2 years into their job, to be seasoned into those roles is too much to ask, because they're just acclimatizing. So for me, I think that all these experiences culminate into this thing that, makes me understand society much better.
I think now I want to talk about disruptive leadership. When I think of disruptive leadership, it takes me back to my childhood, and where you hear things or you hear name drops in conversations like Linda Kasonde, Laura Miti, another troublemaker was Sister D. People who actually did things against the status quo. You made moves that were so different from people in your generation that they labeled you almost as a troublemaker. Do you think that every generation has its own version of disruptive leadership?
Exactly. Starting with Christ's generation, he was a major disruptor. He was going against all the norms, and people would look at him and say, isn't this the carpenter's son? We know him. How is he talking like this? Isn't he one of us? So yes, that has always been there. There's always somebody within the generation that to create change, you need to make waves. And sometimes that requires making people a bit uncomfortable so that they can sit up, take notice, and do something about the situation. So there's always been disruptors in every single generation. It's not new to Gen Z.
Because Gen Z always want to make it look like they are the most disruptive. They are the ones with the voices. One of the things that I think I also want to focus on, I want to talk about is how, especially as young people, when you're talking about work or getting into the workforce, they will advise you, especially like for people like me who are creatives, do not enter into public service because that's a place where your dreams go to die. Because once you enter the office, the structures are so rigid. It's difficult for you. Bureaucratic. You even hear conversations where like, somebody had gone for a meeting, they get in the office at 10, they just leave their jacket on the chair and off they go, because there's a lot of rigid structures, but there's also lack of accountability in these spaces. So how is it? How do you think, especially young people and Gen Z, how do you think you're able?
How every time she says Gen Z, she says Jonah.
Like, how do you feel the Gen Z generation, pardon my bad English, are able to fit into these certain systems?
Okay. So I think that when you look at, just like Linda said, I think that every single time, at every stage of society, there's been a change. There's been a change. The principle remains the same. But how things are done kind of adjusts, ideally to a more effective way. Now, you've given a perfect example. And I think that this is the perfect example, a perfect opportunity to use Gen Z leadership. Because it is not a myth that a lot of government institutions are ineffective. The interesting thing is the people working there are actually the same people from our communities who were brilliant in school, who are brilliant, who have brilliant ideas. And I'll even speak from a media perspective, that you have a lot of brilliant minds within the media perspective, but when they work for public media, almost globally, they kind of get limited and they start doing things within a certain construct. But this is where you need the Gen Z, because the description of what a Gen Z is like in terms of their delivery and how they do the work may sound bad, but I think we should look at the bigger picture. The bigger picture is their argument is always that worry about me getting the job done. Worry about me getting the job done. So be concerned when I don't get the job done. But if I'm getting the job done, then don't worry about me. Why is this effective? Right now, we are worrying about what time they go to lunch, the people at the government office, and don't come back. But I think that when we start giving them actual KPIs and say, you go and get this work done, and at the end of the day, we'll sit down and say, you did this, didn't do this.
Time sheets.
I've just come to learn what a timesheet is. But yeah, so I think that if we use disruptive leadership in the context of Gen Z like that, then we would have sorted this generation's problem, which is having effective leadership.
Yeah.
True.
Because you and I have almost the same complaints.
So Ruth, earlier you were talking about recognition, especially when it comes to certain sectors of our society. And one of the things that actually I want to ask about is how sometimes you feel that you get more international recognition out there than what's currently in the country. But then when you think about it, maybe it's because the structures out there have evolved more than the structures that we're currently having in our society. So you feel that what you get there is different from what you have here. Is it because you think that things in other parts of the world are changing, but maybe we are slowly evolving, or we're not evolving at the same pace as other people are
40
evolving?
years, what,
Yes,
60
we're
years
40.
behind?
The 90s just came to, like the 2000s just came to Zambia now. Do you feel something like that?
Okay, I want to put it this way. I think that most times, most trailblazing women, right? Today, I'm very happy that we're not typically speaking of the same names we hear about, the Mama Betty Kaunda, Kankasa. At least on this conversation, we've got Gwendolyn, Connie. There's going to be people who are watching like, who's that?
Yeah.
You know? But fun fact, she was first ever of Zambia's female.
She was the first woman
Yes.
to ever run for presidency.
Even before that, she was also the first ever, Zambia's first ever female ambassador. You see, so I think we tend to only look at recognition within our home context, right? When it's something that benefits us, but generally, most trailblazers within our country. I want to use an example. This is a male, of course. Clive Chira. Out there, he is celebrated by the international community. They value who he is.
Yeah.
When we bring him here to the home kind of context, a few of those that are a bit learned or exposed appreciate his thought line of pattern, right? And others just think he's just talking because maybe he wants another job or whatever it is. What I'm trying to say is we need to get to a point as a country where we celebrate people at home. We need to remove that familiarity breeds contempt.
But wait, I have a question now, because this is something that is always itching on my mind, and I feel like I should ask Linda Kasonde, because you're from that generation. I feel like sometimes when we're talking about women occupying certain spaces, we are always constantly mentioning the same names. For me, I feel like sometimes maybe there's a certain level of gatekeeping that stops especially the younger generation from actually accomplishing certain things. I don't know if you understand the context in which I'm coming from, but you find that, for instance, when you're looking for certain opportunities, I'm also going to call you out because you're in those spaces, right?
Yeah.
Certain spaces, it's always the same names being like, oh, if there is a Women for Change kind of workshop in New York City, in South Africa, I can guarantee you it's the same names that are going to go there. And at the end of the day, as much as we're saying that Gen Zs are go-getters, I feel like to an extent they're also being suppressed because of certain gatekeeping that is currently happening in our spheres. Do you think that we have a problem with gatekeeping in Zambia? And do you think that there are difficulties that younger women experience when trying to pick up leadership roles?
Definitely there is gatekeeping. It's very prevalent, particularly in the political space, because there are certain people who are in charge of deciding who gets on the party ticket. So that's one area. It happens everywhere, but as one politician once said to me, don't wait for your opportunity, grab it. No one's going to give it to you on a silver platter. But just also to touch on the issue of familiarity breeding contempt. It's not a Zambian phenomenon. It's not about local versus international. I mean, I talked earlier about the biblical context in which Jesus' own community felt he was an outsider. Sometimes there's a view that either who do you think you are or you don't belong with us. So there's that. And it's nothing to do with whether it's a local or international scenario. For example, when Barack Obama was running for the presidency, people within the black community were saying of him, he's too well educated. He's not black enough.
Yeah.
It happens everywhere.
Yeah.
And back to the Sampa, the great example. But then also I wanted to touch on the issue of disruptive leadership. We're not talking about anarchy.
Yeah.
Yes.
There should be structure.
Yes.
It's just what Gen Z are asking for is more flexibility. But I also think that context matters. So I don't think flexibility works very well in the public service because a lot of civil servants are public facing. They have to interact with the public. And the office is the best place to do that. And they themselves, I mean, you need to sign things between departments and things like that. So it's more difficult to have that level of flexibility. So if you want flexibility, you choose where you want to plant your seed.
Yeah.
So it's really is context dependent.
And I completely agree, because I think that the disruptive leadership in this case would have to be in a context that if, for example, the job demands that you need to be there, then you need to be there. But there is a strategy that can work to make people more effective, right? And that's I think is what Gen Z has to them, not inherently, but I think that it kind of has been plotted deliberately, or maybe by accident, but because there's been different generations that have been doing things differently. And all these things that they've been doing differently are culminating into how things are going to be done now, based on lessons, based on experience, based on dynamics changing within society. That, for example, the world has opened up now. When you talk about gatekeeping, for example, that's one of the things that I think Gen Z is changing.
Yeah.
A simple example is like TikTok. It was very difficult for people to discover that somebody's a good singer. But somebody can be singing from their bedroom now, and the rest of the world discovers your talent, and they're like, wow. And you almost instantly start earning money from it.
Exactly. Yeah.
And this will probably be replicated in different spheres of society. And that's one of the ways that Gen Z is unlocking, people's opportunities. So I think that will be a great addition to how we view things, how we look at disrupting what is already. And even when I think about it now, like Linda says, disruptive leadership doesn't mean we disrupt and we ruin everything. No. We kind of just shake things up and say, hey, we can do things differently. And if we collectively agree that
keyword,
this discovery we've made is a bad discovery, then let's make another discovery.
Yes.
But what we've noticed is that things have not been where they should be.
Yeah, before you get deeper into that, I want us to check out some of these vox pops, because we have some conversations from the streets, and I want to just get a little bit of what the younger people are saying. So let's listen to the vox pops, and then we'll come back and have our conclusion. So we'll be right back after this.
First of all, it is a concern that women account for over half the population in Zambia, and yet we have not seen much traction in the election or appointment of women in higher office. Yes, we've had a vice president. Yes, we've had the first Speaker of the National Assembly, Ms. Nelly Moti. It is a concern because women are not in a position to make significant change. And how does a country move forward if over half the population is being sidelined? So women need to stand up together. It needs to be more platforms for women to access some of this information that they need to get into politics. There needs to be an enabling environment, and as it stands, there is no enabling environment for women. Thank you.
I'm a strong believer that women should be able to participate in politics. And I'm so glad that now we are seeing women that are leading big organizations. So it's telling us that women are very capable of leading, and women are very capable of taking up space in whichever space that they've been given.
Those were such insightful Vox Pops. I think the Gen Z can really talk. You really brought it out there. If you didn't think we didn't hear you, we've definitely heard you. So, in conclusion, I think I just want each of our panelists to just give some final closing remarks so that we can wrap this episode up. So I'm going to start with Ruth for obvious reasons. Yes, Ruth.
My final remarks is in terms of disrupting the system, learning from those that have gone ahead of us pre-post independence, is continue to be bold, resilience, own your space, claim it, and you should pray.
Okay, Jonah.
Well, I think that one of the things we should think of is that Gen Z did not create itself. It's not a product of its own. It has been steady progress of parents deciding what their children should be like, what their children should experience, what their children should be entitled to. And the children have picked that up, and that's how they feel. So there's nothing wrong with Gen Z, just like there's nothing wrong with any other generation. It's the specific time we're living in, and things are just right. Because there'll be a generation after that, and things will be just right for that generation.
Linda Kasonde.
I think what I'd say is people shouldn't be fixated on the fact that Gen Z is disrupting. I think we need to learn to coexist. I think Ruth alluded to this earlier, that we all need each other, and it's not about one generation dominating the other. It's about how can we coexist, how can we leverage the strengths of each other. I think Gen Z and the millennials have taught us more about the need for more work-life balance, the need for well-being, and talk about mental health. And these are things that older generations are now picking up and learning from. So we all need each other is basically the summary of everything.
Well put from each and every one of our panelists. I think for my conclusion, what I can say is that change is inevitable. Change can be scary, change can be uncomfortable, but you have to remember that each generation that came before you was a new generation. So the disruptive leadership that was in previous generations was something that was new at the time. So what is currently happening in this generation is just the time for it to happen. So what we have to remember at the end of the day is we all have to still practice bravery. That is where bravery comes in. You have to be bold enough, strong enough, confident enough to fill in spaces that you feel you do not belong to. You need to get there, have your voice heard, and understand that all leadership, as much as leadership might be different, you have the power to decide what happens with you. You have the power to make changes in your workspace, you have power to make changes in your personal life, and you have the power to decide who you're going to be. Like I said, change might be scary, it might be uncomfortable, but at the end of the day, it's what you choose to do with the power that is given to you that will make a difference. So from the Count Me In podcast, I just want to emphasize the need for women, young girls, and also men to step up in spaces where you have to be heard, to put your voice to the conversation and change the narrative if it has to be done. Because at the end of the day, you have to account for what you bring to the table, and there'll be another generation after this one that is going to also demand for answers. So to all the amazing women that have come before us, to all the women that have broken stereotypes, that have changed the conversation, to women that continue to stand between the gap, and to all the men that have helped create safe environments for us, I say, let us continue with the same power. The only way that we can all say, count me in, is if everybody is part of the solution and everybody's voice gets heard. So from the Count Me In podcast, I hope you have been inspired to also say, yes, count me in, put me in that conversation, so that one day when people can talk about me, I'll also be one of those iconic women in the history of Zambia that has helped shape our society. So from me, your girl, Stu Relatable, Auntie Stu, we've come to the end. But you know where to find us. And first of all, last but not the least, shout out to the European Union for making all this possible. Until the next time, if you want to learn more, subscribe to the channel and keep the conversation going. So from my panelists and I, it's goodbye and stay blessed.